So there was a Pauper qualifier today that I managed to top 8 with this deck list. So I'm going to go over the replays. Hopefully Magic Online will work with me. I'm not optimistic that it will go super smoothly, but something is better than nothing. Um, I feel like the games were pretty interesting for the most part. The metagame was... I guess I can go over that after the event, but the metagame wasn't quite what I expected. Um, but so this list is basically the same list that I have in the guide that I made. I made a guide and posted it to Twitter. So if you go on my Twitter and scroll down a bit, you can see that. The only difference is that I swapped this island for a plains, or the plains for an island, and then in the sideboard, instead of playing Dust to Dust, I'm playing Standard Bear and two Annuls. Um, so I think I'm pretty happy with these 12 slots. But I was playing 3 Dust to Dust in the sideboard, and I think Grixis Affinity isn't really very popular, especially in these big events. I honestly expected probably like the probably only like 3 or 4 people were going to play the deck in the whole event, just because Grixis Affinity right now, I think like only the experts are playing it, and like the random multi-format players aren't likely to pick the deck up. So I wanted to figure out how to fill up these last 3 slots, and I knew that I wanted the last 3 slots to be cards that I could bring in against glitters, because I really don't want to have to bring in the red blast against glitters, because you don't really have time to sit like name red and sit around and like hold up mana for their spells, and like so I definitely wanted them to be blue or white cards, and so I came up with 2 Annuls and 1 Standard Bear. The reason here is that Standard Bear is a card that can come in like, in the mirror match and against the glitter decks, and then Annul is a card that I can come in against gardens and against glitter decks. This is not as good as something like Remove Soul or Dispel against gardens, but being able to counter the random artifacts, especially in the early game, like if you can counter their artifact on turn 2 or turn 3, it's extremely effective. So I kind of like this card. I'm not 100% sold on these, but I think for this event, this logic made sense. Um, so yeah. Otherwise, the sideboard's pretty stock. 6 Hydros for mono red, 6 red blast for blue decks. The main deck is pretty much what I've been playing recently. I think like you can play 4 Brainstorm. I've been liking 4 Priority just because like there's so many aggro decks. But if the mirror match and like more mid-rangey stuff gets more popular, then 4 Brainstorms can be correct. And based on how this tournament played out, I would probably play 4 Brainstorm going forward. Like the winner's metagame, I don't think was full of aggro decks. Like the winner's get metagame is mostly blue mid-range decks. So probably better to play 4 Brainstorm. But I mean, it's also like just extremely minor. Like it's gonna come up, but the edges you're gonna gain from this sort of thing are extremely minor. All right, so round one, I was paired into Hyson, and he had been playing. Let me just pull up. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up his Twitter. So what I did when I got paired into him is I went to his Twitter, and let's see, I pulled up this list here. You can't really see the whole list. Let me see if I can. You can't really see all the cards here, but you can see most of them. So I pulled up this list and I was like, okay, he's probably going to be playing a list with 2 Campfires, no initiative, and no initiative is like allows you to play the game very differently because you don't actually have to hold up counter magic. Like against this deck, normally there are really big punishes where you don't hold up counter magic on a key turn and they slam initiative and like snuff out and then you just die. Like the game just ends on the spot because you didn't hold up counterspell at the right spot. And against this sort of thing, you can be much more liberal with how you spend your mana. So game one. Okay, so this hand is on the play. I think it's fine. It's like not a great hand. But I knew I didn't know for a fact I was going to play against Gardens, but I think against Gardens you keep this just because It has like this Squadron Hawk is really nice to have in the opening hand. This is just like the best card in the deck, and Behold the Multiverse is great against Gardens as well. Like I think normally I don't like to keep hands with Citadel Gate plus Lorien Revealed, but these set of spells are really good against the deck that I know I'm going up against, or I'm likely to be going up against. So I kept my opponent goes to 6. Also, before we get into this, I very much dislike my opponent's build of the deck. I think this is like my um, the way I understand the Gardens deck is you play the initiative as the payoff for playing all these removal spells and all this card draw. And if you're not playing, it just doesn't really make sense to me to not play the initiative because that's the whole reason to play the deck in my eyes. But anyway, so I didn't discard the cat the first time because I wanted to play around a Bajuka Bog, but I got punished by drawing a second cat. So maybe I think I would have made the same play again just because I had a second journey. Like if this was a I don't know what else, but there's an argument to be made for discarding the cat in case you draw into another cat or strands, but um, it's fine. So I missed my land drop, which sucks, but I mean, you could miss your land drop against Gardens and still win. It's not the end of the world. So at this point, I'm probably just going to main phase the Behold. No, I just pass. Okay, so I think at this point I didn't actually know that they weren't playing the initiative, so I wanted to hold up a counter. I think if I knew for a fact they weren't playing any initiative or monarch, I should just be main phasing this and hitting my land drop. Yeah, no, this is not great. I think the play I made was fine at the time, but if I had like X-ray vision and I knew their deck list, then I probably would have main phased the Behold the Multiverse just because it would allow me to hit my land drop on that turn. And he was just hanging out. I'm not going to flashback this cat to play into a sweeper. This match is going to be pretty long, I think. So I want to counter this just because, like, these draw twos are going to be the best targets for counter spells because um, they're not playing initiative. So, and they play Campfire. I think this card is terrible. I don't think you should play this card in any Pauper deck ever, but here we are. I mean, I'll kind of explain why I don't like this card. So against Mono Red, for example, on turn 1, let's say you have this in your opening hand against Mono Red, right? You play it on turn 1. On turn 2, you spend another mana to gain 2 life. 2 mana plus a card to gain 2 life is a horrible deal, okay? 3 mana plus a card to gain 4 life, also a horrible deal. Okay, what about 4 mana for 6 life and a card? Also a horrible deal. What about 5 mana for 8 life and a card? It's still not a good deal. Like this card is not great, even if you draw it in your opening hand. And what happens when you're playing against Mono Red and you top deck this? Like, you, it's just heinously bad. I don't understand. I understand that this card is in the deck because you want to use it as an anti-decking tool, and you want to also just incidentally gain life or whatever. But I don't think this card is proper playable. Anyways, that's my rant about that card. So I'm just playing stuff. I when I have the Guardian, I think it's fine to play 2 creatures out. They do get to hit 2 creatures with the sweeper and then edict away the Guardian, but like I have a bunch of creatures in hand and they have basically no cards in hand. Like this is what happens when you play cards like this that don't do anything, is that you run out of cards. Anyways, so this matchup is just a lot about balancing having creatures on the board, in the graveyard, and in your hand. Because if you commit too hard to one zone, then they can punish you. So if you have too much stuff in the graveyard, they can bug you. If you have too much stuff in play, then they can cast a sweeper. And if you have too much stuff in your hand, then you have to go to discard. So you sort of have to balance that. And also, if you don't have enough stuff in play, they can punish you by playing emblems. There's no emblems in this deck, but so you have to sort of balance having enough stuff in each of the 3 different zones. Okay. So at this point, it's just like play a creature, make them kill it, play another creature, make them kill it, play another creature, make them kill it, until they die. And like in these sorts of games, I think if my opponent had the initiative, they would just be like they could turn the corner at some point and then like kill me. But as it stands, it's hard. Okay, so I played Modern Age, discard Strands. This makes sense. Probably going to discard the island next turn. I end up committing 2 creatures here, but I think it's fine. My opponent's low on cards. And I have more creatures. So on this turn cycle, if they play a Crypt Rats, this doesn't actually flip. So what I can do is pump, attack with my creature. If they want to crack the Crypt Rats that they would have played, then they don't get to kill the Modern Age. And if they don't crack the Crypt Rats, then I can cast Modern Age cast Journey to Nowhere and exile the Crypt Rats. So what happens here is I pump, they cast Spinning Darkness, I flashback Strands, they cast Spinning Darkness again, and this is fine. Like getting a card for the Strands that I discarded is great. In this matchup, Prismatic Strands has like basically no targets. Like this and Crypt Rats are the only damage sources really that matter. So I played a Hawk. So now, if my opponent has Crypt Rats, this honestly might have been a mistake, but I think it's fine to like pressure for lethal because if they don't have anything, they just die. If they have Crypt Rats on this turn, they can wait till this flips and then kind of kill me. Apologies if this is going to go too fast, but I don't really have a great way to control the replays. So they gain 2 life, they gain more life, so they don't die. Yeah, they have fogs. So like again, why are we playing fogs in this deck? I do not understand. Like the you don't like this just does nothing. You spent 2 mana to do nothing. At least that's how I view it. Okay, so I could have countered this Wellspring, but I think it's fine because if they find a dispute, then they have another draw to that I can counter. This does get them closer to the dispute, but it's fine. So anyways, I exile the fog with this. The problem with the fogs is that they don't actually help you win the game. So like fogs are great in decks like Flickertron or whatever, where you can loop them and you're actually working towards something. But here, my opponent isn't actually working towards anything. They're just playing random 2 fogs in their deck for no reason. Okay, this button not work? No, it doesn't. Okay, game 2. Anyways, this video might be a little bit more ranty than normal. Okay, so I boarded out all 4 strands, and I boarded in 2 annuls and 2 destroy evils. So there's an argument to be made that you want to leave in one of these strands for stuff like Crypt Rats, but there's a risk that they get stuck in your hand. Obviously, they're really bad. I definitely would always bring in the 2 annuls. I think the destroy evils are fine because they can hit stuff like Troll of Khazad-dûm or whatever, but the Twitter list that they showed also had Finger Marauders, so I think it's fine. This hand is great. This is like exactly what you want to do. Now I just need to find a way to get a card out of my hand so that I can resolve this. Being on the draw with the Squadron Hawk is obviously not great because you often have to go to discard. So now I'm just kind of hoping my opponent kills this cat because that way I'm not as I'm better insulated against sweepers basically. So I draw a duplicate hawk and I play a hawk. So now they sweep the board. Then they duress the brainstorm out of my hand. I think this is going to be probably the play that actually won them this game. I think I probably would have won this game had I had this brainstorm, but you don't win every game you play. Okay, so here I have the choice between cycling this and playing it as a land. Yeah, so I can cycle this and play it as a land, or I can miss my land drop. And then if I'm missing my land drop, I can either play a hawk and hold up a counterspell, just hold up a counterspell, or play the Guardian. So I choose to play the Guardian because, well, there's a couple things. I choose not to cycle this because I'm at 4 mana, and this matchup is going to go like a lot more turns. And so I just want to be able to cast this, hard cast this. I choose to play the Guardian because like it's just the most mana efficient play, and the Guardian is going to get answered by my opponent, I think, in one way or another. And I want to keep all these hawks in my hand because I would like to brainstorm combo. So here, another weird spot. So I could cycle this and play it as a land, but I don't really want to because I want to hit another land drop and hardcast this. And now I'm just going to counterspell anything they play because I'm sort of out of action. So now I'm just going to play the Drummer Cleric to get a card out of my hands. It's sort of awkward not hitting my land drops or anything. I definitely think that this brainstorm being taken is what lost me the game. I also don't understand whether the storm, like, my deck kills in chunks of like 15 or 20. Like, gaining life is not strategy that makes sense to me. Although, I mean, my opponent is probably better at the game than I am, so it's hard to say. It's hard to say. It's always funny because like I feel like oftentimes I disagree with players that are stronger than me, and I feel kind of stupid for that. But well, anyway, so I'm just gonna counter the first thing that goes into the stack with this null because basically this card is just in the deck so that I don't have strands in the deck. Because this is way better than strands because strands only hits like a handful of their cards in weird spots. Okay, so I draw into a land. I play Lorien. I draw into more stuff. Um, at this point, I feel like I'm actually not in that great of a spot. My opponent has developed a lot of mana and they can scry every turn. But yeah, and here I'm not going to pump because they can just trump with the plant, and I'd like to keep developing with the hold. Like, imagine if my opponent didn't randomly discard a bunch of cards for no reason. They would just be crushing me, but who knows? Who knows? They still win this game, so, it's hard to say. Okay, so I see a Guardian of the Guild Pact and a Gate. I bought on the Gate and draw it anyways. I'm interested in Guardian of the Guild Pact. Um, so now I attack all after pumping. My opponent takes it all. Play the Guardian. So now my opponent has to have a bunch of specific cards to beat this. They need to have like either double sweeper, or Crypt Outs into Edicts, which they do. It's possible that I committed slightly too much here. I think that's pretty likely. I think probably I wasn't supposed to play out this last thing. I wouldn't be surprised if that actually lost me the game here. Yeah, I think that was probably just a bad play. And then probably here I should have played out two things. Like I'm holding on to hope that I can draw into a brainstorm for the So what is my opponent sequencing? I guess they're playing on counterspells. That's good sequencing. Like I'm holding on to hope that I can draw into a brainstorm here, but I'm giving my opponent a bunch of time to develop their stuff. Although to be honest, they're not really doing a whole lot. Um, like they're not like here. If I was playing against a deck with the initiative, I would be forced to play these out. Like I would have no other option but to play these out. But because they don't play initiative, I can just kind of hang out and not be worried about anything. But honestly, I probably should have played these out just because I've only have 3 brainstorms in my deck. One of them's already in the graveyard. I don't know. Maybe it's fine. Actually, I have 25 cards left. Yeah, I don't know. I probably play this fine. I think the main mistake was that I committed too much to the board on that one sequence. So I discard a journey, but instead of the cat because I want to get both sides of this. And I don't really imagine myself needing multiple Journey to Nowheres anytime soon. I haven't seen a single creature other than Crypt Outs out of my opponent's deck. I don't think. So they kill the cat, bog the cat, which is annoying, but what are you going to do? And they're activating things on my upkeep. Like, it's very common. I do this too against my opponents. You want to activate the scries and all the gain life stuff on parts of the game where your opponent can't F6 so that you waste more of their time to try to time them out. And you can see, like, I made the treasure on my opponent's upkeep because they're not going to be able to F6. Like, if they press 6 on their own upkeep, they'll skip through their whole turn. So they obviously don't want to be doing that. And you can see my opponent doing the same with the scries and stuff. Totally understandable. But like, see, they're at 53. They're still just dying. Like, imagine if these weather storms were kill spells. Instead of gaining a bunch of life, they could just kill the stuff. I don't know. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but to each their own. Yeah, I think if I would have played this game differently, I probably could have won. Like, holding on to these kind of was not great overall. I mean, I don't know. See if I can speed this up a bit. I'm pretty sure I just like got wrecked here by Crypt Rats, because now the Crypt Rats can just kill me pretty quick. I only have 1 counter left. Okay, let's see if I push the skip button a bunch of times if it will actually play any faster. It doesn't look like it's doing that. See, here I'm still just waiting for the brainstorm, which maybe is wrong. I don't know, but I feel like I have 17 cards in my deck, and there's 2 brainstorms left, and I also have like 2 preordains to help me find them, and there's like another Lorien I can find that would also help me find them. Like I have so many good. I also have Modern Ages. Like I just have so many good paths to finding the brainstorm. So I draw the brainstorm. Obviously, play the journey first before I play my hawk, because if they crack the cryptats, then they get to kill some stuff. I ended up playing out 2 of these. I think is correct because of Chainer's Edict, and I can counterspell any sweepers. So I'm definitely like countering that. I don't know that I like countering the second one. They have 3. I kind of want to save. I probably should have saved the counterspell for the cryptats. I didn't know they had Mort Miner in their deck, so it's kind of awkward. But now I'm just dead because they can just play the Ratsing and they can just play the Rats and crack it. And here I'm just bluffing strands. Because if I didn't have strands, they would just crack this and kill me. But see how I'm attacking for 40 damage? Like, why is Weather the Storm in your deck against me? I don't understand. Don't understand. Makes little sense to me. Okay. Game 3. I should just hit play. Okay, this hand is medium, but I like that I have the annul in the opening hands because I can counter artifacts. I'm not going to counter the campfire. This card is horrible and shouldn't be in their deck. Okay, I bottom the Guardian of the Guild Pact, I think, because I don't have enough mana. I'm looking for mana. Top Preordain. Ichor Wellspring, easy counter. Easy counter. This is like the best card in their deck, I think. Maybe a Dispute. I don't know. Here I'm just looking for more action. So I top this because if I draw into more lands, then I can draw 3 cards. And if I draw into more spells, then, well, I drew into more spells, which is great. So keep beating in. Easy counter. Easy counter. Wellspring, easy counter. So I've countered 3 draw 2s so far. My opponent is left with a measly campfire. So here I could hold up a counter, but that just seems like a horrible play. I'd rather develop my own game plan. Like, as a general rule, counterspells get better as the game goes on, so it just makes a decent amount of sense. I definitely should have attacked first here. The logic, I think the reason I didn't is if I draw a gate off the Modern Age. Actually, no, this is fine. The sequencing is good because I'm not going to play the Modern Age before I play the Squadron Hawk, so that I don't risk drawing multiple Hawks. But I have the out of drawing into the Basilisk Gate, in which case I'd want to pump. So now I'm just like super far ahead. My opponent has 4 cards in hand, and I have way more than 4 cards in hand. You always have to counter this because... And see, they just discarded a card for fun. Like, cool. Yeah, it's great. This does nothing. Okay. So now I play the cat. This is probably a little bit unnecessary. I don't like that very much. They cast Snuff Out, or cast, because they don't have a swamp. That's just good deck building right there. Yeah, I discard the Standard Bearer. Again, I want to keep these Hawks in my deck for when I draw Brainstorm, because it'll allow me to get a surge of cards. And their whole turn is just scrying 1. That's their entire turn, which does not inspire confidence. So now I find the Brainstorm, and now I'm just gaming. Now I'm just gaming. This game is pretty much over. Like, just countering these 3 cards, and then having my opponent have a random 0 for 1s is great. I'm a big fan of that. Now I'm just in the market of countering random stuff because, like, I don't really like countering removal spells too much in this matchup. Now this right here, these 3 cards is the, like, I don't know what to call it. There's no like official name for it, but it's like the Guardian formation where you have exactly one X1, exactly one X3, and then a Guardian of Guild Pact forces the opponent to have 2 kill spells and an Edict, and they can't get more than 1 creature with the sweeper if they have a sweeper. Here I'd play another cat, which maybe is unnecessary. I think it's fine. It's good against kill spells. Like, it's good if their hand is kill spell, Edict. It's good to do this, but if their hand is sweeper, kill spell, Edict, it's better to not do this because they're going to be forced to use a sweeper on 1 creature anyways. And it probably doesn't matter that much. I'm just super far ahead. Like, and their turn is scrying 1, so you know, yeah. Now I just draw 3, so I'm gonna have to go to discard, but I'll probably just discard a journey. Yeah, doesn't matter. Now I just murder them. Moment's Peace. Again, my opponent has spent 2 mana on a card. and it has had a card in their hand, and it just does nothing. It just does nothing. And then now they're just doing another card that does nothing. Like what? I don't understand. All right, this is not going to be a very good YouTube video, but hopefully you can bear with my complaining. I'm sure there's logical reasons for all this stuff, but so they bog me. I lose random stuff, strands. I think. Like the best place for my opponent would be like Arms of Fedar into Fumes would be their best play, but like all this life they've gained, and they're still just dying, still just dying, and they're dead. Okay, that took a long time. Round two. Okay, so I know this opponent. They are a powerful wizard who I respect. I didn't think they. I thought they might be on Tron because they like to play Tron, and I said no Tron, please, smiley face, and they said sorry, smiley face, and then I said F. Because this matchup is atrocious. This is probably the worst matchup in the entire format. Maybe Cyclostorm is worse. No, it's probably the worst matchup in the entire format. The reason being that my opponent is assembling an engine that I can't really interact with, like at all, and I don't actually pressure them. Like in this matchup, Caw-Gates has to be the beatdown, and Caw-Gates is not the greatest beatdown deck, especially if you're playing beatdown from the start of the game. But this hand is really good. If any hand is going to beat Tron in game one, it's going to be this sort of thing. Because I'm only playing Gates, which is where you want to be. Like, this is how you win. But, all right. So they have two Tron pieces. I have 3 Hawks though, so if I find a Brainstorm, I'm in business. But I'm forced to like I have no better play than just pumping and attacking. I'm gonna hold up the one of Dispel. They now have Tron on turn 4, but their mana is tapped, so I just have to keep poking in and hoping that my opponent stumbles. There's an interesting sequence that happens, I think, on the next turn, where I'm not sure that I played correctly. Okay, yeah, this is the turn. Okay, so I pump. Hopefully, Magic Online will go like play by play here. I attack, and they cast a Fog, and I have the choice. Okay, so they cast Teachings, which I'm gonna let resolve, and then they find Moment Space and they cast Moment Space. And here, I'm like, okay, they can't flashback Moment Space. The cards they could have that beat me here are Weather the Storm and Prohibit. I think they play 1 Prohibit, most likely, and they probably play 2 Weather the Storm, maybe 1 Weather the Storm in the main deck. And based on the way this game played out, like, it's pretty likely that those cards, like, it's pretty likely that those cards would be in my opponent's hand, because, like, my opponent's best play on this turn is probably, like, Muldrifter, or, like, I don't know. I think I'm supposed to counter this, but basically I know for a fact that, or I know it's likely that my opponent's going to have Prohibitor Weather Storm, and then I'm going to just get completely destroyed. Because if I let my opponent untap from this position while I'm tapped out, they can just do some ungodly things. So, that's not what I wanted to do. Hit play. So I counter, then I pass priority, and they Weather the Storm, which is very bad. I would like them to be dead, and they're not dead. And the second main, I can Dawnbird Cleric away the Moments piece, but like my opponent is going to untap with Tron and play, and Teachings in the graveyard, and 5 cards in hand. Like, it's not looking good. So now I basically am like, okay, well, if I draw into Journey to Nowhere, I can win. If I don't, then I will lose. And I did not. So here I have the choice of pumping or playing the Luring Revealed, and I think I have to keep the pressure up. Like, I'd love to cast a draw 3, but I basically just have to hope that my opponent is like breaking off. And spoilers, they were not breaking off. And the Teachings for Moment Space, and they Moment Space. I think this is fine because you're going to 1. And going to, like, the difference between 10 and 1 is the difference between me having to pump my creatures and not pump my creatures. And if I don't have to pump my creatures, I can do stuff like Lorien and then hold up a counterspell. So I like this play by them. Mnemonic Wallback, Moment's Peace. And I can, I'll probably just, like, move on to game 2 when this game is lost. But what I did in this game, like, when you're playing against Tron, you should never press the concede button. Like, the concede button should not exist against Tron, because you never know when you're going to get into a prolonged match, and you're going to want to try to time them out. So they have Ephemerate. This game's over. like they have a fog in hand, they have ephemerate in hand, they have teachings. I guess that's an XL. I mean, I don't know. This game is over. Like if I had a bunch of counterspells in my hand, maybe I could win from this position, but let's just move on. This game's over. All right, game two. So I have a bunch of sideboard cards. They're not great sideboard cards, but so I boarded. Oh, I don't like that I boarded this out. Maybe it's fine. Okay, so I boarded in 2 Destroy Evil, 3 Pyroblast, and 2 Hydroblasts. The Hydroblasts are for my opponent's Red Blasts, which most lists, Tron lists play like 2 or 3, I think, maybe 4. Not entirely sure. And then Strands come out. You don't need Strands. The only thing that Strands hits is that's actually going to be impactful is the Fiery Cannonade. You usually play like 1 Cannonade, and maybe 1 on the board to tutor for. But Cannonade isn't particularly good against my deck, so I don't really feel strongly about leaving this in or out. And a Termacat, like the way that I'm going to win this game is by countering all their spells and then killing them with a Squadron Hawk or a Guardian of the Guild Pact. And so I'm just kind of cutting stuff that doesn't interact super well. I like bringing in the Destroy Evil for the wall because you can kill the wall at instant speed. But yeah. And then I'm trimming the Modern Age because I'm trimming the discard stuff. Like it's sort of when you trim Sacred Cat and Prismatic Strands, you also want to trim on the Modern Age often because those cards are synergy cards that work well with each other. And so when one of them is bad, the other ones also get worse. So here I cast Squadron Hawk, and I have to go to discard. But like playing against Tron, you're never gonna win like a clean. Okay, I don't have to go to discard. What am I talking about? Yeah, this is why I love Behold the Multiverse because it allows you to get a card out of your hand, and it makes it easier to cast Squadron Hawk without going to cleanup. Like if this was what's it called? Deep Analysis, I wouldn't have been able to foretell this into exile and then have a perfect hand to keep all my cards. Because this cat might not seem useful now, but if I draw into the Modern Age, this is a card I can discard. Like pieces of cardboard are valuable in this sort of deck because I have Brainstorm and I have Modern Age. Okay, so I Behold the Multiverse into Counterspell Modern Age, and I chop both, even knowing that I'm not likely to hit my my next land drop. I think both of those cards are quite good here. I mean, obviously, if I never hit my land drops, like I'm just gonna die, but sometimes you just die. So yeah, I missed my land drop. I discarded Destroy Evil to the Modern Age, develop a Guardian. And the nice thing about the Guardian is that it can't be blocked. Obviously, they can still fog, but and here I should be targeting this with a bump. This is just a bad play. Like, don't do this. This is just a bad play from on my end. I don't know why I was doing this. Part of it is that like I was trying to play really fast because in these matches you have to play quickly because if you play slower than your opponent, then you can't time them out basically. And the faster you play, the faster you force them to play. And if you force them to like panic, it can be good. They cast Mystical Teachings, Reveal Prohibit, and then they cast Refractor. This is a smart play because now I can't they can resolve their Refractor, which essentially is going to like double or triple the number of spells I can play on every turn. Because currently they're only allowed to play 2 different spells because they only have 2 colored sources. I guess 3 now. So yeah, this makes sense. I draw an Island, which is good. So now I'm just going to hold up Counterspell plus Red Blast. And basically my goal is to let them resolve their fogs and then just counter the card advantage stuff. Like I could fight over this, but I don't think that's good. Like if they couldn't counter back or anything or play another fog, then I think it's fine to counter that sort of thing. But what I like doing is forcing my opponent to hold up mana in addition to their fog. Like it forces them to play awkward. Because now they can't just like tap out for something on their main phase and then only hold up 1 counterspell for their fog. Because if they do, then I'll just counter the fog, counter the counterspell, and then they die. Instead, they have to hold up all their mana going into my turn. And then I just don't counter this. And then they can't ever tap out because then they just die. So I feel like I explained that poorly, but you can make it, this works against Turbo Fog as well. You can make their fogs really awkward by holding up this counter magic because they have to be ready for a fight at any moment. And you don't necessarily have to be ready for a fight at any moment. So they've currently fogged 3 times, and now this is the 4th one. So if I can get this into exile, then I just win the game, basically. Easy counterspell on the Lorien. The Pyroblast is annoying because like I haven't given them a target for this. Like so it makes sense that they have Pyroblast in their hand. Like this is an extremely expected outcome. because I haven't given them any other targets for this. But it makes sense. So now they get a flashback moments piece, but this is the last moments piece, the fourth one, which means that they can't ever loop the fogs. So they have no way to prevent combat damage anymore. The only way they can win is if they somehow combo me out on this turn specifically, or if they can gain like a million billion life with Weather the Storm. Which, spoilers, they were not able to do that. They're just drawing. I don't know what exactly the out is here, but I assume there's something. Or they're just pretending there's something. That also is reasonable, I think. I'm just going to pump this a bunch of times in case they have life gain. Like if they go like pulse, pulse, pulse a bunch of times, then I still don't think that's able to raise the Guardian, but... Alright, game 3. Alright, so this hand is terrible. I have 1 land. This hand is much better. I bought him a second preordain just because I want to keep hitting my land drops. If I'm able to hit my land drops, that means I'm able to use the Behold, which can dig me into gas. Turn 1, Molten Tributary. This start, when I see this across the table, I'm like, oh, let's go. Their hand sucks. But so yeah, this is another ugly Squadron Hawk. Like, I don't advise for the ugly Squadron Hawk, but I kind of don't want to be making land drops that aren't gates. And in this matchup, like, I'm not going for value. I'm going for murder. Like, I need to kill my opponent as fast as humanly possible. So I think making a play that is maybe not the greatest value play, but is like proactive is... Maybe it's not a good play, but it's at least coherent with my game plan here. Okay, so end step, cast Behold. I'm willing to counter back. I really just want to get this out of my hand. Like, I want to spend the counters as soon as possible so that I can do other stuff with my mana. Because holding up counter spells every turn is not good. And Senol is a bit late to the party. It's much better than the alternative cards would have been, like whether it's or not whether strands or something, but it's not looking great here. So then I can fight over this, but they get to counter back. And I'm just gonna counter anything. Like there was not even a thought in my head like, oh, should I counter this? Should I not? I was just gonna use the counter because I need these counter spells out of my hands. Counter spells out of my hand so that I can use my mana for other stuff. So I find a journey. I have to journey this. This is not a great spot to be in. Also discarded a Hawk. I felt like I had to. But now if I draw Brainstorm, it's 1 less card. So that's not great. So then they return Lorien Revealed with the wall. I play the Guardian. And so now I'm just kind of hoping that they have nothing in their hand, which is pretty unlikely. Since they get to draw 3 cards. And they draw 3. Play the map, play Crystal Grotto. I'm like, okay, there's a chance. Their best play is map for Crystal Grotto, then maybe I've got a shot. I discard the second bird. I need, like, the Brainstorm Bird Dream is over. And here I tap out for Lorien. Like, I'm hoping, okay, if I can find some counterspells and try to stop a Flicker Lock from happening, maybe I can win that way. It's possible that I was supposed to pump here. I'm not entirely sure about that. So I counter the wall. They return a fog. And now if they have a flicker effect, they just win on the spot. So now I have Brainstorm Awk, which is not great. I do get to shuffle away 2 bad cards, but not great. So I do attack for lethal here. It's not quite lethal through like some life gain spell, but I know they have the fog, and I think that that's going to be likely how they win. Play this, shuffle up. So they evoke. And I basically have to hope that they don't ever draw into a flicker effect or more fogs, which is basically their entire deck. Like, I just have to hope they just draw like their entire mana base, which is not particularly likely, which is sort of why this matchup is heinous. And now this game's over. But they have 7 minutes on their clock. So they have to kill me in 7 minutes. And they have to return a fog every single turn. So basically, I don't know. There's no way to speed this up. But so I'm just going to give you the rundown. Basically what happened is I made them fog every turn, and they weren't fast enough, and they timed out. They had a lethal like they went for a bunch of Rolling Thunders. They had Rolling Thunder in their deck as the kill con, but whew, that brainstorm was bad. But I had like a bunch of Hydroblast in my hand, and I was able to counter the lethal Hydroblast as they were running out of time. Like if this was a paper game, or if they had infinite time, they would have won. But this is not paper, so I was able to win this game. All right, round 3. I looked at this player. I don't think they had like recent results or anything. This hand is like broken. This is like great. Turn 2, Modern Age discard a cat. This is like, whew, loving this. Okay, so they play Fairy Seer off Obscura. They go top top. So now I discard the strands instead of discarding a cat. And in this spot, I go for the Squadron Hawk. I know that so I'm just assuming that all of my opponents that play blue black are likely to be multi-format players, unless I know their name. And then if they're multi-format players, they're gonna net deck. And if they're gonna net deck, they're gonna net deck the Bako list, because why else would they net deck anything else? I guess it's technically pronounced like Besu or something, but I just can't do that. Okay, so they brainstorm, cast an augur, reveal a spell pierce, which is making the Behold look worse. So here I want to hit my land drop, so I think I'm just going to play the Modern Age. And I do hit my land drop, which is nice. Bring a cat back. I don't want to commit too many X1s, because this deck does play a 1-of Suffocating Fumes. But I'm sort of balancing like, oh, I don't want to put that many X1s on the board, but also I don't want to have that many cards in the graveyard, because they play 1 Jukabog, so I can't really play around both. They cast down, and I can't cast this into Spell Pierce. Like, probably the Spell Pierce is going to trade for a card at some point, but I'd like to force them to hold that mana for a bit. Okay, so they go for a Monarch. This is bold. This is a bold move. To me, this basically says, okay, I have Snuff Out, and I'm going to just trade the Monarch back. Like, I'm going to Snuff Out, and then probably we'll end up trading the Monarch back and forth at some point. So I Journey the Fairy Seer. Attack. I assume this is getting it snuffed out. Does. And then I main phase another Hawk. This is another ugly thing. Like, I'd rather brainstorm before I Hawk, but I don't really have a choice here, because I only have 2 mana, and I need to get another flying creature into play to try to fight over the emblem. Like, the emblems, when an emblem comes into play, the entire game is about the emblem. So I have to play with that in mind. I can't just like, oh, I'm going to try to brainstorm for Squadron Hawk and get value. No, the entire game now revolves around this Monarch. Okay, so they tap out, they draw 3, I get the Monarch back. And now they can't spell Stutter Sprite, so I want to run out the brainstorm. I'm kind of breaking off, drawing a bunch of lands, but I have Prismatic Strands in my graveyard, which is sweet. I can help fight over the Monarch. I think this deck coming into existence is kind of the reason why the Monarch decks have fallen out of favor for the most part, because you're just so efficient against the Monarch pals. So I go ahead and quad block. I didn't really want to triple block with just the 3 X1s, because that's bad into any removal spell. I think it's reasonable to trade the Dawnbreaking Clark for the Thorn. Like, that's fine. So I go for the Flashback Strands. I know they have Spell Pierce in their hand, but I think I'm fine at this point exchanging the Spell Pierce for the Strands. And I think they're also fine at this point exchanging this, just because they want to get the Spell Pierce that I know about out of the hand. But I also know for a fact that they're only playing 1 Spell Pierce, because like I know the list that they are playing. So I main phase the Behold, forcing them to counter, and now I can just tap out for the Lorien. Obviously going to do that second main. I could leave back some stuff to try to block these guys, but I think I'm like, based on how this game is set up, I'm fine racing my opponent. So I don't have to play around Spell Pierce, because they don't have another one in their deck, because I know the list they net decked. So I play the Lorien. They brainstorm. So now what they're looking for is Suffocating Fumes, and the fact that they just cast down the cat is like great news for me, because that means they don't have the fumes. And if they don't have the fumes, they're just going to lose very, very quickly to the mediocre beats. And keep in mind that like I'm not activating my Basilisk Gate, because okay, here maybe I think this is just a misplay. These are a bad play. Like, don't activate the Basilisk Gate when your opponent has mana. It's just a bad play. Yeah, I would not recommend making this play again. This is sort of why, like, my opponent, I spent 3 mana on to pump, and my opponent just killed my dudes for 2 mana. It's just horrible. I mean, I'm far enough ahead that it doesn't really matter, but Like, I just had other good plays. Like, I can just, like, play other stuff. I think I sort of wanted to, like, not play into Spellstutter Sprite, I guess, but I'm not a huge fan of how I played this. And they reveal their Agony Warp. The 75 plays 1 in the main deck. They play Gurmag. Pretty straightforward. And now I think it's fine to just, like, I'm short of enough up on enough resources that I'm just going to pump every single turn to make them have a kill spell every single turn. I mean, it's not pretty, but I think it's fine. They remove the power from this, which is nice for me because now I know that attacking with this does nothing. Whereas had they removed the power from this in combat, they could have forced me to tap this, which would have stopped me from blocking. So they're the Monarch, but, like, I don't know. I'm not too super worried about it because, like, I have way more resources than they do, and they have to kill 1 creatures every single turn. So discard a gate just because the strands could be useful to help fight over the Monarch if I ever get it back. And, like, I just forced them to have kill spells every single turn, and now they've run out of kill spells. So they cast Spellstutter Sprite. And this is a very important thing that you want to attack. If your opponent has to trap block with Spellstutter Sprite, you want to attack before you cast these Preordains. Like, I just straight up didn't play these Preordains because my opponent can have more Spellstutter Sprites, right? Playing around Spellstutter Sprite is one of the key skills that makes a good Pauper player, in my opinion. It's sort of like Days and Legacy. This is the Days equivalent. Like, knowing when to play into this card and when not to is a pretty important skill in this format, in my opinion. Okay. So once again, now we just keep pumping every turn. They're gonna run out of removal eventually. They don't play infinite removal in their deck. Like, maybe the first turn activating the Basilisk Gate wasn't correct, but now it's definitely correct because, like, they don't have infinite removal in their deck. So they get in, they double chump, and now they're in the double abyss. I still don't play these because they can have more Spellstutter Sprites, and I don't really need to. Like, I could fire these off, but I feel like I'm so far ahead that it doesn't really matter. So now I could block the Ninja. Like, the obvious play here is to block the Ninja, take 6. But my read here was if they're attacking with everything, that means they likely have Suffocating Fumes, because they probably would want to leave this back to block. In the event that they, like, block the cat, maybe. So if they have Suffocating Fumes, it's best to block the Augur, because I can Strands the Ninja so they don't get a card, and this will only have 1 damage marked on it when the Fumes resolves, and then I can kill them on the Crackback. The other consideration is that even if they do have Suffocating Fumes and I resolve the Strands, they can return the Augur Boss back to their hand with the Ninja that they might have, which would give them 3 more looks at a Fumes. So I think this is just the correct play. I name blue so they don't get a card. I can take 5, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so they have the Fumes, as I read, so I definitely feel kind of smart for making the play I made. And now once again, I'm going to pump and then attack. They have to have a kill spell, and they don't. They are dead. I didn't even cast these Preordains. I don't know, maybe I should have cast these, but I just hate playing into Spellstutter Sprite when I don't have to. Like, there are some games where you're forced to, and, like, if your opponent has that card, they're winning, so you just don't play around it because you're not beating it, but in this game I think I was beating it, so I decided to play around it. Game numero dos. Alright, this hand has no lands. This hand is medium. Like, Modern Age is my best draw here because it allows me to discard these. Play the Caw-Gates, obviously. And here, okay, here it's like impossible, okay? Because if I play Preordain and they have Spellstutter Sprite, they just basically win like 80% of games from that spot, right? So by not playing my cards, I make Spellstutter Sprite bad. But also by not playing my cards, I let them develop mana, assuming that they have more land drops. And I don't draw into lands, they can just play their lands out and just kill me that way. Like, if they just make 2 or 3 more land drops, slam Monarch, the game, I'm just dead. So probably it was, I think I actually liked not playing my card for that turn and just taking 1 more draw step. And I think on this draw step, I decided to play the Dawnbreaker Clerk to play around Spellstutter Sprite, but I think I'm not beating Spellstutter Sprite with this hand, and it was correct to cast period. I think this is just a bad play. Like, I had a line of reasoning that led me to my play. So it wasn't like a thoughtless, oh, just a mistake. But I do think that this is an incorrect play. And once again, I'm playing around the spell search pipe. It's just costing me too much. This is just costing me way too much. This is just a bad play. But I mean, I'm being consistent at least. Like, you shouldn't play around a card and then not play around a card. So I do like that I'm being consistent, but um, I don't like that. This is just not good. Okay, so you play Thorn, and I have a Guardian, and they can't counter for 1 mana. So I have a plan at least. My plan is not the greatest plan, but it is a plan. So I know for a fact that their deck has one Agony Warp in the main deck, one Edict in the main deck, and then 2 or 3 Edicts in the sideboard. And I would not expect my opponent to bring in the Edicts out of the sideboard. So I'm guessing that they probably have about 2 to 3 outs to this. And like, they get a lot of looks, but I don't really have a better plan. Like, a common thing that I do when I'm trying to think through what the best play um, is I think like, okay, my best play, like my first candidate play, is bad for X reason, right? So for example, I've determined, okay, this Guardian of the Guild play is bad because my opponent can have Chainer's Edict, they can have the other Edict, I forget what it's called, they can have Agony Warp, and they get a bunch of looks at these cards, and that doesn't seem like a great plan. But then I'm like, what's my second best plan? It's like, I mean, I guess like play a cat and then Journey the Thorn and then lose to any piece of removal. So it's like, okay, my best plan sucks, but my second best plan also is like even worse. So I guess I'm going with my best plan. I don't know if that made any sense at all, but that is sometimes your best play is a bad play, and you just have to work with it. So they cast Agony Warp. I Red Blast Agony Warp. They spell pierce the Red Blast, which is this makes it, this is again a card that makes sense for them to have in their hand because I haven't given them an opportunity to use it yet. And now I'm just dead. This game is over. Game's over. It's like, what are they gonna have in their hand? They're gonna have a bunch of removal spells and counter spells. Those are the only things they can have in their hand. So this game is just over. I can let it play out for a bit longer, but I think the key mistake in this game was I didn't realize how much it was going to cost me to play around Spell Stutter Sprite, and I think it would have been better to just lose to Spell Stutter Sprite on turn 3 than playing this sort of game where I just kind of screwed myself. Like, I just cost myself too much. But honestly, I don't feel bad about how the decisions I made, because at least I made the decisions with a game plan in mind, and then I stuck to the game plan. So I think it's fine. Sometimes you're gonna make plays that aren't the best, and you're gonna lose, but that is magic. That is like more common than I'd like to admit. Okay, so I draw a Red Blast. I want to resolve this Quadranok more than I want to kill the Murdering Mystic, but this game is just over. My opponent's been the Monarch for way too long. Like, really the only way that I win this game would be like drawing a Guardian or something, but I also could like Red Blast the Murdering Mystic on my opponent's upkeep. I think that's probably a reasonable play, but I'm just kind of hoping that my opponent has no spells in their hand, which is not a reasonable assumption. Like that's never gonna be the case, but you know. Also, pumping this is probably just a waste of time because they get a chump, but I don't know why I'm still talking about this game. This game is just completely over. I'm just gonna exit out. This I'm just dead. Okay, that was game 2, I believe. Anyways, that's like a common mistake that I see other people say or make, and I think I'm obviously make that mistake too, where I'm playing around a card that I can't beat. So like, why am I playing around it? Like, if they've, I don't know. Okay, so I play Citadel Gate, and in blue because I can put the red on the Sea Gate, so that I can cast Counterspell easier. I see a Red Blast and a Guardian, which is great with this hand of 4 lands. So in this game, I can actually play around Spell Sprite reasonably well. And if they go for a Ninja, I can Red Blast the Ninja before damage. So now I'm just kind of, I feel like I'm in a decent spot. My opponent casts Brainstorm on my end step, And the cycle's Lorraine revealed for an island. So now I'm kind of afraid of Monarch. Like, their best play is going to be making land drops and then playing Monarch with a bunch of counters back up. And here, I brainstorm on their end step, which I don't normally like doing that, but I have a second brainstorm. This is the main reason I did this is because I have a second brainstorm. If this just cycled for 1 mana, I would have just cycled it on their end step because which is basically what happened. Because I have a second one, so if I draw a Hawk, I still have the combo, and then I don't want to cast this on my own main phase because my opponent fights over it with a Sprite. I want to be able to double counter, which if I cast this on my turn, they Sprite. I Red Blast, they Sprite, I counter. That's great. My brainstorm resolves. I pass to them, they slay Monarch, and then the game ends on the spot. So I can't cast this on my own main phase. So I'm forced to do it on my opponent's end step. However, now I have no lands. So if my opponent is smart, what they're going to do, so they're going to pass to me. I'm not going to draw a land. I'm going to have to go to discard. And they're going to pass me again, and I'm going to have to go to discard. And they're going to have to pass me again, and I'm going to go to discard. And they're going to have a bunch of mana in play, and then they can just kill me. But don't think that's what happened. Luckily for me, my opponent... I forget what happened here, actually. Yeah, and now I want to use this Red Blast on my opponent's end step because I risk going to cleanup if... I'm going to have to go to cleanup if I don't use this, and my opponent is pretty unlikely to counter, like, start a fight on their own end step. I cast another Brainstorm on their end step, which I think is fine. Maybe it's not a good play. I don't know. I think it's a fine play. Because now it allows me to make a land drop and still have 2 counters up for their Monarch. Like, if they go land, Monarch, counterspell, they can win the game. Like, in all these Monarch matchups, the Monarch is just everything. So I guess Preordain. I think I bought them both of the lands because I don't really need more mana here. And I hit the Basilisk Gate, which is great. Now I have 2 counters. They have 7 cards. But I don't really want to play my stuff. Like, it doesn't really achieve anything to play these out. So now my opponent goes to cleanup. They have no plays. They discard cast down. So what this tells me is their hand is entirely kill spells and counter spells, and maybe Monarch. Because like Monarch, if they tap out for that, I can counter it and then resolve something cool of my own. So I can see why they wouldn't want to play that. And they don't have any targets for counter spells. They don't have any targets for kill spells. So I know their hand is entirely made up of those 3 things. So I go to my turn. I can cast this Lorraine, but why would I do that? Why would I give my opponent a target for a counter spell? Like, this is just... I don't want to give them targets for their stuff. Because if they don't draw a land here, they just have to go to cleanup again. So now they just go to cleanup again. Okay, so I draw. No reason for me to do anything. They think about casting something, they cast a Grimag Angler, and I don't want to use one of my counterspells on this. I'd rather use the Journey to Nowhere, whereas counterspell can fight against anything. Journey to Nowhere specifically only hits creatures, so... And now they have to use a counterspell specifically, or double sprayed, I guess, to counter the Journey. So I'm pretty happy with this exchange. And they don't draw land, I go to cleanup. I'm like, oh great, this is fantastic. I'm just going to keep doing nothing then. If you're going to go to cleanup, then I'm not just going to keep doing nothing. And then now I just have like 1,000,000 mana. And if you've ever played a control mirror, you know how important mana is. I honestly, if I were them, I would have cycled Suffocating Fumes on my main phase. So I actually have a decent amount of information about what is in my opponent's hand, because I know they discarded a Spell Pierce, they discarded a Thorn, and they didn't cycle Suffocating Fumes on their main phase to look for a land. So what this tells me is, well, Spell Pierce is pretty easy to construct a hand where this would be the worst card in their hand. The Thorn, it's somewhat likely they have another one, I think, given that they discarded this. And then the Fumes, I think if I were them, the only reason that I would not cycle this on my main phase would be because I'm specifically holding up multiple counterspells. So like, my opponent's hand could be like Spellstutter Sprite, Counterspell, Dispel. And if they want to hold up everything, then they can't cycle the Fumes on their own turn. So you can sort of start to construct what your opponent's range is through these different game actions that they're taking. So my opponent brainstormed on my end step, and then hit their land drop. And now I'm just going to play my worst card. And so now we're not in the place where I'm making them go to cleanup, because I myself am going to have to go to cleanup if I don't do anything. So now I've essentially just made them discard 3 cards for no benefit. Now we're just starting the game. Basically, we're just starting the game, except for they are down 3 cards. Or, like, the 3 cards they're down are, like, basically lands in play for me. But we're basically just starting a game where I'm up on resources and they're not. So now they play fairies here, and this is a very common like motif in these blue versus fairies decks, where you actually want to counterspell the fairies here because if you don't use their counterspell on the fairies here, it enables the opponent's spell center sprite to counter your counterspell. Um, so you are sort of forced to make this play. I'm actually not too sad about it because I have 4 counterspells in my hand and like I want to spend my mana, and if I can spend my mana and refill with the Lorien Revealed, then I'm pretty happy. Pretty happy about that. Okay. This draw sucks, but and now I'm just gonna use the Basilisk Gate because I have so much mana. I don't really care about my opponent tempoing me with removal. I just want to exchange resources because I've put myself up on enough resources that I have an advantage. And so now they cycle. I don't really like this cycling, but it's fine. Actually, I do like the cycling. They're specifically trying to resolve Murmuring Mystic with like enough mana up to pay for stuff like Spell Pierce and hold up their own counter magic. Okay, so they play Murmuring Mystic, a counter. They dispel. Now I'm gonna counter again. And now I'm just like up on resources to a large degree. Like now I can just resolve these big draw spells, and because I have more mana than my opponent, I'm just largely managed. And I don't even have that much more mana than my opponent, but like these turns where my opponent went to discard were key here. Obviously, if they would have drawn lands, then they could have been in a better spot, but I think me not playing my spells was key. All right, round 4. Round number 4. Okay, so this hand is actually one of the few hands that I would keep without a turn 1 tapped gate. And this is sort of why I'm playing. Let's go over here. I guess we can't see the deck list, but I'm personally running all 12 tap gates because I'm playing 4 Guild Gates and then 4 Citadel Gate and Sea Gate because I really don't like to keep hands without a gate in my opening hand. And like you'll see me mulligan perfectly reasonable hands that don't have a tapped gate on turn 1 because the tapped gate on turn 1 just sets up your game so nicely because your deck is mana intensive. Like you have double blue and you want to like double spell white cards and you have a bunch of colorless lands in your deck. So you often want to start on a tap gate. But this hand doesn't have a tap gate and I kept it, and I would definitely keep this hand again. This hand is great because Modern Age on turn 2 is your best play, A, and B, I have 2 things to discard. So if this resolves and I discard these, I feel like I'm winning like probably 70% of games or something that this resolves and I discard 2 cats. Anyways, that was a long explanation for an opening hand, but and okay, now I have another interesting decision. So my 2 options here are Island Modern Age or Sea Gate on white. So if I go Island Modern Age, I'm not casting another white spell for the next 2 turns, which likely means I'm not casting another spell for the next 2 turns because this requires double blue, this requires white. This I'm not going to cast because why would I cast this? So it would require me to draw like exactly Modern Age or Preordain for me to have another play. However, Contaminated Aquifer could mean Blue-Black Terror. It could mean Blue-Black Fae, and those decks are going to have counterspells. So if I go tap Seagate, and my play next turn is to cast Modern Age and discard the cat and then immediately Embalm it, that play is weak to Counterspell and Spell Pierce. So I decided to just tap out for this because it's too much value, basically. Even though it sets me up poorly for the future, it's just like a good... I just want to get under the counter magic. Okay, so they're in Blue-Black Fairies. Reveal Echoing Decay. Okay, so now I have another interesting decision. Okay, so... Well, this is actually a nice frame to pause this. So draw another cat. I discard another cat. Okay, so I know my opponent's deck has exactly 1 Bojuka Bog. So if I choose not to on another cat, and they have Bojuka Bog, they get to exile both of these. However, my question is, would they have played the Bojuka Bog on the last turn if they had it? And I think the answer is probably yes. The only reason that they would not choose to do that is if they wanted to sequence their tap lanes in this manner. So the Blue-Black Fairies deck has a lot of 2-drops. They have Augur Bolas, Counterspell, Cast Down, Spellstar Sprite, and I think that's it. And then some other various removal spells. Like most of their cards cost 2 mana. And so, or multiples of 2 mana. Like the Monarchs are 4 mana. And Ninja's also 2 mana. So they're I played this deck a bunch before, and you want to sequence tap land on 1, untap land on 2, tap land on 3, untap land on 4. That's a similar thing with this Gates deck, where a lot of your cards cost either 2 or 4 mana. And so you want to go tap land on 1, untapped on 2, tap land on 3, untapped on 4, so you can effectively cast spells throughout, like maximize your mana usage. So that would be the reason that they wouldn't use a Bojuka Bog. But it's also possible that they would want to use the Bojuka Bog to exile the cat. Um, so this is the decision that I'm making. Do I want to play the Heap Gate and return a cat to try to play around Bojuka Bog, or do I want to play this, tapped gate, and set myself up better for the future? Because I can have 4 mana on turn 4 if I play the tap land, whereas I can't ever have 4 mana on turn 4 if I play the Heap Gate because I know what I'm drawing. So I think the best play in this spot is to just play a tap land. If they have Bog, they have Bog. They only have 1 in the deck. And then if they don't hold up counter magic, I can just slam this. And if they do hold up counter magic, then I can do various things. Like I can unearth a cat, play Heap Gate, and then make a treasure on their end step or counter their spell. So yeah, I think I want to play this and then just pass. Let's see what I do. Yep. And they have the Bog. So I think like this is a reasonable like sequence. Obviously they gave up on getting a cat last turn, but they wanted to be mana efficient, so it sort of makes sense that they would not have played this last turn. And this is actually something I did think about in the game. Some of the stuff like is like hindsight, but this is a thing I actively thought about in the game. Okay, so I definitely don't want to cast Guardian of the Guild Pact. I definitely don't want to pump the Vector Glider. I thought about not attacking so that I could block this so they can't ninja, but I don't think I'm too worried about that. And here I'm just hanging out, basically. I don't feel like I'm in a great spot because my opponent's up on cards. But if they go for a ninja, I can cast Strands, at least, and trade 1 for 1. They do get another card when they resolve the Augur, but I can block the... Whoa. Okay. This was maybe a bad play. So here's my thought process. Okay, I want important, like number 1 importance is resolving this Guardian of Guild Pact. Number 2 is resolving this Modern Age. But the Modern Age gets better when you have the cat in my hand. So I can't really use this as a bait spell super effectively. So my thought process here was like, okay, I'll cast the cat. They'll cast Spellstutter Sprite. And then I will resolve my Guardian. And if they don't cast Spellstutter Sprite, it's not the end of the world, because it actually allows me to hold up the Prismatic Strands with the cat, assuming that they kill the Vector Glider with some kill spell. Because like let's say they go end step, cast down the Vector Glider, untap, Echoing Decay the cat. I can respond with Prismatic Strands, and what's it called? Not let them draw. However, I think it's actually correct to play the Modern Age in this spot, because if they draw Fairy Seer, it allows them to Spellstutter Sprite for 2, which would effectively turn this card off. Like if they drew Fairy Seer here, then I couldn't cast this for a while. So I think the correct play would be to play the Modern Age. They're probably going to counter it, and then probably just play the cats. But I wanted to play this Guardian. Like I had a reason for my play, that just wasn't a good one. Okay, so they cycle Lorien. And now they have Echoing Decay and Agony Warp. And Agony Warp is one of their 2 answers to this, which is very bad for me. So now I make a treasure. So now I cast the Modern Age. It might have actually just been better to... Yeah, no, there's no reason to try to resolve this through counter magic because they just have Agony Warp. So if I go Guardian of the Guild Pact, they counter, I counter back. They just go untap Agony Warp and basically just win the game. So that doesn't seem very good. So I'm just kind of hanging out. I need to somehow engineer a scenario where they either have already used this Agony Warp or... yeah, that's pretty much it. I basically need to bait this out before I play the Guardian, because their answers are very few to the Guardian. Okay, so now I block, and flashback strands. If they counter the strands, it's whatever. I'll replay the cat. So now I cast Brainstorm. I'm either baiting out a spell sprite or trying to dig for a counterspell to defend the Guardian. And now I play the Modern Age. They do counter this. Now I get to play Gate, resolve my Guardian. And I do believe I have another Basilisk Gate on top of the deck. And now, because they've used their Agony Warp, their only answers are Edicts, which they haven't used their Echoing Decay, so if they do find an Edict, they can go Echoing Decay Edict and win. But if they don't, they just die. So, yeah, and I think they have one Edict in the deck. Exactly. So, yeah. They're basically just looking for their one-outer. And they don't hit their one-outer, and we move on to game 2. This is going to be a long freaking video. Holy crap. Okay. This hand is broken. They play a tap land. They play a swamp. Okay, so now they're repping Spellster Sprite. They're not repping Counterspell. They could have their one of Spell Pierce. I don't want to cast this on this turn because the longer I hold this in my hand, the better it gets because I'm more likely to draw into Sacred Cats or Prismatic Strands. I think I boarded out. I didn't even go over the sideboarding. Yeah, so I boarded out 3 strands. I brought in the 3 Red Blast, and that was my entire sideboard plan against this deck. I could bring in Destroy Evil, but that only hits like Murmuring Mystic and Mag Angler, and that's just gonna rot in my hand. So, anyways, all that to be said, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to play this on this turn because it's better to just wait. I think the 2 candidate plays are to foretell this or play this out. And I kind of like foretelling this because let's say I foretell this, my opponent plays a tap land on their next turn, and I draw into what's it called? Squadron Hawk. Having a card out of my hand for Squadron Hawk is quite nice. What? What? Did it crash? No, it didn't. Okay. Anyways, I play the Modern Age. That's probably a bad move, honestly, but whatever. They play... it's not the worst, actually, because discarding this Cleric is kind of whatever. Like, these can block ninjas, but I already have a good answer to the ninja, so... And this digs me to hit more land drops and digs me to my best cards. So it's probably not the worst play, but probably it's marginally better to foretell on this turn. The other nice thing about this card is that you can punish your opponent for holding up mana. So let's say my opponent's turn sequence here is Lorien Revealed and then attack for 1 and pass. Now they're holding up a counterspell, and if I just go tap line, behold, go, I have effectively spent my mana, and I force them to not be able to spend their mana. Whereas with most spells, your opponent can just counter them. The opponent can't counter you foretelling a card. So it effectively lets you spend your mana while not letting your opponent spend mana. Basically just a punish for your opponent tapping out. And this sequence is totally fine, because I just journey the ninja, and I move on with my life. So now I know for a fact they have Spellster Sprite in their hand, which is really freaking annoying with the Fairies here in play. And this untap line is so clutch. Holy shit. This is unbelievably clutch. Okay, so now I foretell. And now I think I'm going to go for the Beholding Multiverse on my opponent's end step, because if they counter the Beholding Multiverse with anything other than Dispel or Spell Pierce, it allows me to untap and jam Guardian of Guildpact, and as we've already established, the answers to Guardian of Guildpact out of my opponent's deck are not plentiful. Okay, so now I cast Journey to Nowhere. I think okay, this is another thing I thought about, and this is the thing I 100% thought about in this game. So I cast Beholding Multiverse on my opponent's end step. If they had Dispel or Spell Pierce, they 100% of the time would have used it. Like, if I'm in my opponent's shoes, I can't imagine a scenario where if I don't have, or rather, where I have Spell Pierce or Dispel, and I don't use it on Behold Multiverse. So, what that allows me to do is roll out those cards in their hand, and know that when I cast this Journey, they have 2 options. Either they counterspell it, which I'm totally fine with exchanging counterspell for Journey to Nowhere, or they cast their Spell Source Sprite that I know about. I think they have a Brainstorm too. In which case, I can just counter the Sprite, and then move on with my life. And if they don't use the Sprite now, then they can't ever Sprite my counterspell, because the counterspell costs 2 and they only have 1 fairy. Yeah, that's a lot of words, but hopefully that was coherent in some capacity. Okay, so they brainstorm, they cycle fumes, they hit fumes off the brainstorm, or else they would have done that in the other order. And they cast Fairy Seer, and as I said, this is the same motif where you have to counterspell the Fairy Seer, where the opponent's spell sprite gets to sprite for 2. But now they don't have double blue, so I get to jam my 4-drop, and they have to have one of their edicts, which maybe they have, maybe they don't, but this is my best play, so I'm going to make it because they have Spellstar Sprite in their hand. So now I know their hand is Counterspell plus Spellstar Sprite, but I'm just going to play I'm just going to play the cards from weakest to strongest. Like, they don't really want to be Spellstar Spriting these cards, and if they don't cast Spellstar Sprite, then I'll just pass. Like, I'll play with some weak cards and then pass, and if they do cast it, then I'll just jam the rest of my hand. Anyways, so yeah, I guess this, and now I have Dispel plus Red Blast. Red Blast can hit the sprite, and Dispel can hit whatever they use to defend the sprite, which is going to be this counterspell here. So I know two out of the 3 cards. I'm hoping this counterspell isn't the one in the graveyard, but I'm pretty sure this is in their hand. I don't know, maybe I'm going insane. So I'm trying to bait out the sprite because... Okay, so this is actually a sequence that I thought about. I think I tanked for a long time here. So my opponent has 3 cards in their hand. I remember thinking about this, but I don't remember exactly. Yeah, so their hand is Spellstar Sprite Counterspell, and I was thinking, okay, I can go Squadron Hawk. They're gonna cast Spellstar Sprite. I'll blast the sprite, then they'll counterspell, then I'll dispel, and then I'll resolve the Squadron Hawk. And the next turn I can go Brainstorm Squadron Hawk. And I'm like, okay, what if their last card is another counter or another Spellstar Sprite? Can I try to beat that? And I decided that I wanted to try to beat that. And the way I was gonna do that was by baiting with Modern Age. So now I cast Modern Age, they sprite, Red Blast. They have another sprite, so I'm pretty sure their last card is Counterspell. So I can't actually dispel the Spellstar Sprite, which is annoying because now I can't spend my mana effectively here. But next turn, I can go Brainstorm. Sorry, I can go Squadron Hawk, they counter a Dispel. And then I can Brainstorm and try to hit an untap land, or I can wait another turn cycle to get my combo. Anyways, this is another long sequence of words to basically say that I played around their last card being another counterspell by playing the Modern Age, and their last card was in fact another counterspell. So, because if this Squadron Hawk combo, I keep hitting okay. If this Squadron Hawk combo resolves, I'm just gonna win basically every time. And of course, I can't cast the Squadron Hawk into the counterspell. So, and they are clocking me, but I'm not super worried because if I ever find a Basilisk Gate, they die. So now I know they have Counterspell, so I cast Squadron Hawk, they're going to counter, I'm going to Dispel. And then in this spot, I choose to cast Brainstorm because if I had an untap land, it's insanely good. And if I don't, it's still okay because I have another Brainstorm. And I'm also getting clocked for quite a bit, so I kind of want to spend my mana efficiently because the game is going to end soon. But I do hit the untap land. And now my opponent is under a pretty significant clock. And I choose to block with both to stem the bleeding. But this does allow my opponent to edict me. If they had an edict as their last card. But basically the calculus I made was I'm pretty sure I'm beating an edict. If their last card is an edict and I double block there and then they edict me, I'm pretty sure I can still win. So and here I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna try to beat an edict. Because the only like the set of cards that beats me here is like cast down edict, and then they draw perfectly and I draw nothing if I don't block. Whereas if I do block, all they have to have is just edict plus like one more good card. Like if they have edict plus something else, and yeah. So I choose not to block, and then they just concede because they're dead. That was round 4. Round 5. I think round 5 was a weird one. Yeah, this is a weird game. Okay, my opponents, I think I looked them up and they're on Caw-Gates. But I didn't look up their list, which I definitely should have done. I ended up looking at their list later through the round, but so this is a weird spot where like I kind of want to save the Journey to Nowhere for the Sacred Cat, but I kind of have to Journey to Nowhere the Fiend's format just so I don't take a bunch of damage. My opponent can punish me by what's it called? Playing the Dawnbringer Cleric, but I don't really have a second best play. So I make the play that I have. And then I cast Squadron Hawk to discard a Strands, which kind of sucks because Strands is really good in this matchup. Like in any Gates mirror, you're going to end up, basically the game is going to turn into a race. And Prismatic Strands is really good in Erase. However, the alternative was not spending my mana, and I don't like not spending my mana, so... And yeah, now I feel like I'm just dead because they have a Guardian, they have a Flyer, so they can't actually get in with the cat, and I'm just kind of sad. Just kind of sad. However, so yeah, that's why I just use the counterspell on the Hawk, because, like, my opponent doesn't really have good cards for me to counterspell outside of Guardian, and they've already resolved a Guardian, so what I have is I'm just going to use my counter. And I cast, so yeah, I cast a Hawk just to try to block if they have draw another gate, which does turn off my Brainstorm combo, but I think it's fine. So now I draw Guardian, and this is just the best draw in my deck by like a mile. Because now it allows me to stop their lifelink and possibly race. They have another Guardian, which allows them to race, but with these Prismatic Strands, basically my entire rest of the game, all I'm going to be doing is activating the Basilisk Gate on the Guardian and then flashing back Strands, and then hoping that my opponent doesn't have more Strands than I do. I looked at their list, I think, at this point, and determined that they don't have any Lightning Bolts in their deck, so I'm just not going to play around that card. Or not necessarily in their deck, quote unquote, but in the posted list they had online. So now basically I just am sticking to the plan of casting Strands and pumping the Guardian until the game ends, and if I win, I win. If I lose, I lose. But I don't have any other option. And basically the rest of this game is just going to play itself. There's not much, yeah. There isn't not a whole lot more to say in this game because I'm just going to be attacking. So I'll go ahead and speed this up. Okay, my opponent has been slain. They didn't draw any Prismatic Strands. So I was willing to go for like 4 more turns, but they were just dead. Okay, game 2. And this was a matchup like this. I think this match I definitely got the good end of variance because a lot of these gate mirrors will just be like the first like 5 to 10 turns, or maybe not 5 to 10, like 5 to 8 turns or something, are just both players trying to jockey for a position. And then at some point it becomes a race, and oftentimes like one player is just super favored in the race. Oh, this exchange is really interesting. And one player's favored in the race if they got off to a good start in the early game, often. But okay, so this is a lesson in looking at your opponent's deck list. It's a cast Period Name. I play the Modern Age. My opponent Pyreblasted. I'm like, okay, I planned for this. I knew they would have Pyreblast. Makes sense to me. I'm like, okay, I'll get my 1 free damage in. And they destroy the journey. And now I can block. And I was, at this point, I was devastated. I was like, okay, this is a horrible play. I threw the game, ruined everything. My life is over. But obviously you can't think like that because you just have to win from this point, which is not a great spot. Having the Standard Bearer in play against the gate, I guess I should explain, like, you have to target the Standard Bearer with the gate, which is why I brought this in against my opponent. It would have basically just disabled the gate and would have made this game trivially easy to win. But instead, the game was not trivially easy because I decided to attack for 1 damage when I should have actually been playing around a card that is in my opponent's deck. But anyways, basically my plan from this point is to draw into enough Strands to try to race them with a Guardian, which is certainly a plan. It's not the greatest plan, but it's the only one I've got. I decided to discard the gate, which is maybe actually wrong. I'm not sure. So I decided to pump the cat instead of the Guardian. Is that good? I think it's fine. I calculate that my opponent isn't going to actually be able to kill me without activating the gate, and then I force them to spend their whole turn activating the gate, and then I can Strands it. Let's see if I did my calculation correctly. So I'm at 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wait, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, wait. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so they can kill me. I don't know why I pumped the cat. Is this just a mistake? Let me think. Maybe it's not a mistake because it forces them to attack with a guardian or activate the gate. In which case I can attack with a cat again. No, this play's just bad, I think. I wonder what I was thinking at this point, but I think this play is just bad. I think I should have just used the gate on the Guardian of the Guild Pact. I don't know, maybe there was some reasoning. And here I'm kind of forced to strands anyways. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like I didn't have to strands because it wasn't lethal, but I kind of wanted to because it allows me to spend my mana efficiently. But maybe that's not the right approach. No, I'm not sure about how to play this game. Okay, so I brainstorm into double strands, which is basically just the nuts. And I have another guardian to block their cat if they draw one. So, yeah. Basically, I'm just writing these. Basically, if I can kill my opponent in 4 turns and they can't kill me in 4 turns, then, or they can't find more strands in 4 turns, then I'll be able to win this game. And luckily for me, like, I'm kind of favored in these matches because even if my opponent has 1 strand in their graveyard, they can't tap out because I can counterspell the strands. Whereas I know that my opponent doesn't have counterspells, and I know they don't have Flaring Pan in their deck, so I'm free to not tap out. Or sorry, I am free to tap out because my opponent doesn't have counters, whereas they have to hold up mana for fear of a counterspell. Similar to the Fog play pattern that I was discussing against Tron. So now they have strands, and there's no reason to use my counterspell now because my opponent just flashes back, and I'd rather threaten to use this later. Because if my opponent taps out on this turn, they just die. So I can pump and then counter. And instead, I now force my opponent to leave up mana for the next strands, because now they have to hold up both strands. Because I have the threat of this counterspell. Basically, it's just forcing my opponent to be mana inefficient. Again, not sure if this stuff makes a lot of sense. I feel like I'm not the greatest at explaining, but yeah. So they flash back the strands. I'm not going to counter because they probably have another one. I'm actually at 1 here, so I have 2 turns, basically. I know my opponent has 1 more Squadron Hawk in hand, and then I know they have a basic, so they have 2 mystery cards. So now I get to shuffle, so I can rip strands off the top to buy myself another turn. But instead they just die. So, okay, sure. Yeah, I just drew more strands than they did, basically. I drew 3 strands, and my opponent drew 1 of them. So, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I have cantrips in my deck, so, like, I'm going to draw my strands more often than them, but not this much more often. I definitely think I got away with something here. Although I do think this matchup should be favorable. I think that this mistake should have probably cost me the game if both of us had equal variance. Okay, that was round 5, right? Yeah. Round 6. Okay. This hand is great. Well, maybe not great. It's good. I have a bunch of lands. I have some anti-aggro stuff if I'm playing its aggro. And I have some anti-control stuff. The nice thing about the cat is that it's both an anti-aggro card because it's lifelink and you can sort of peck in for damage and gain some life. It's also an anti-control card because it requires the opponent have two removal spells. Okay, so my opponent is playing mono blue. So I'm definitely not going to cast Journey to Nowhere. I'd like to either save Journey to Nowhere for when my opponent is tapped out and they can't cast Spell Pierce, or I want to save it for a larger creature. Because I can use Vector Glider as an answer to Delver, whereas I can't use Vector Glider as an answer to a 5/5 or a 6/5. Okay, so now this is an interesting spot. I have 3 options actually. So I can cast Journey to Nowhere, I can cast Guardian of the Guild Pact, I can cast Prismatic Strands. So if I think my opponent has Force Spike, then I should not cast Guardian of the Guild Pact because that's the max punish for that. If I think my opponent has just counterspells, I think holding up Strands is a pretty reasonable play because it effectively blanks their mana for this turn cycle, or half of their mana. If I think my opponent has nothing, I should cast Guardian, or nothing or Spell Pierce. I should cast Guardian of the Guild Pact. If I think my opponent has just a Spell Pierce, I think casting Journey to Nowhere is fine because they either spell pierce the Journey and then I Journey the Delver, or they don't and then I Journey the Terror. If I think my opponent has nothing, Journey is the worst play because it's the least mana efficient. Or if I think my opponent has nothing, casting Journey is actually fine because I can Journey the Terror. Let's see what I end up doing. I cast Journey, my opponent counterspells, and this is actually kind of the worst case scenario because I don't get to spend all my mana on this turn. Yeah. I mean, I definitely prefer, of the three options, I definitely prefer casting Journey to casting Guardian, assuming that my opponent has Counterspell. But I think if I guess that my opponent has Counterspell, I should hold up the strands. Obviously, I'm guessing what my opponent has. Like, I don't have perfect information, and I haven't given them an opportunity to use any Counterspells, so their range can be Force Spike, Spell Pierce, and Counterspell. Um, and given that they all have one mana, I thought on multiple turns, I was kind of assuming that they were going to have some sort of soft permission. Obviously, this doesn't rule out soft permission. Like, they can still have that in their hand. But so I decided to take it. Maybe it's correct to chump because it allows me to spend my mana efficiently. Like, let's say I chump, then I can go Island, Guardian plus Embalm. Maybe that's better. I think this was actually a spot I tanked for a long time on. Like, I think I tanked for like 5 minutes or something here. Maybe not 5 minutes, but a couple minutes. So I can cast Guardian and hold up Dispel. Dispel doesn't do much outside from counter a snap if I'm tapping out for the Guardian. Or I can counter a cantrip, I guess. Um, the main thing that I calculated was if I cast Guardian and I go block, 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 take 3, I lose both my cats, and then I can't start pumping back in with the cats. However, like what I wanted to do was cast Guardian and then block here with the Guardian, block here with the cat, and then take 8. The problem is that I would gain 1 back up to 8 and then take 8 and die. So that's not a good play. So basically, I calculated that if I cast the Guardian, I'm forced to block all 3 of these creatures, which loses me both my cats, which is bad. So I ruled out this as a play. And so my other 2 options were either pump a cat and attack, or hold up strands. And I think pump a cat and attack is just like way better. Or sorry, hold up strands is way better because it's going to allow me to be mana efficient on future turns. And like, I don't even think I live. Like, I pump a cat, gain 5, and then chump. Like, I don't even, am I even living there? I don't think so. I think I'm just dead if I do that. So now I get a block, cast strands. If they have counter spells, I can flashback the strands, but it's nice to like spend the mana on the strands up front, and then later it basically allows you to be mana efficient in the future, which is always nice. So now I cast Guardian because I have the strands in my graveyard, and it's a little awkward because I haven't given my opponent a chance to use a Spell Pierce, but I think they're going to be able to exchange Spell Pierce for a card no matter how this game plays out, just because I'm going to be using all the mana on most of my turns. So then they just attack with Delver, which, what does this mean about their hand? It must mean they don't have a bounce spell because, like, I don't know. I feel like you're supposed to attack with everything there most of the time, but obviously, like, I do block, flashback strands, but I'm at least forced to use the strands. So now I always want to hold up multiple layers of protection, because if I just hold up strands, my opponent attacks with everything, and then they have 1 counter, then I just die. So, I mean, I don't have a better option than holding up multiple layers of protection, but so I guess Lorraine, I can't do anything about that. They have 7 cards in hand, but I'm slowly beating down. And like they don't, my opponent's deck is only removal spells or bounce spells, so they don't have a permanent solution to this problem. The permanent, like the most common permanent solution to this problem, is to kill me, but they can't kill me because I have like set up a wall of shit. So okay, and now like they're just dead because they can't block this Guardian ever, and they die. And I think they got mad about me having Dispel, the one of Dispel, which is kind of funny because, like, I don't know, you put cards in your deck to draw them. And also, like, I had that card rotting in my hand for, like, 5 turns or something. I don't know. It's kind of a weird complaint, but I can see it. I obviously get mad at stuff that doesn't matter a decent amount of the time. Okay, game 2. So here I have constructed my sideboard with this deck in mind, so I had a pretty reasonable plan. I knew I had exactly 6 cards that I wanted to bring in, which was 3 Red Blast and 3, what's it called? destroy evils. And then I knew I had exactly 2 bad cards to bring out, which were the 2 Dawnbringer clerics. And then from there, it's just about picking the 4 worst cards that I think are worst in the matchup. And I think the fourth strands, although you can see how strands would be really good in that sort of game, there are a lot of other sorts of games that this matchup will play out as where you end up exchanging resources and then your opponent just has a bunch of creatures in play. And fogs are not great when you're not working towards something. So like in that last game, I was working towards killing my opponent by pumping my cat and then holding up fogs. But if my opponent's able to fight over my threats, the fogs are pretty bad. And the post-board games tend to be more interactive than the pre-board games. Um, so that's my thought there. And then I board out a Guardian. This is bad on the draw because it's super slow. I board out a Counterspell because I'm just upgrading this into Red Blast. And then I board out the 4th Preordain. Again, this is a bit worse on the draw. So I think that makes a decent amount of sense. First hand I only had 1 land, so can't keep that. This hand is pretty medium, but I did think for a bit about if I wanted to put the Citadel Gate on red, but I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense because I don't actually have a red card in my hand. Okay, so I thought for a while here, I'm like, okay, I could Journey to Nowhere the Delver. That's pretty good. It gets all the pressure out of play, but Journey to Nowhere can answer big creatures, and the Modern Age cannot answer big creatures, so I played the Modern Age. I basically thought, like, okay, if I can only resolve 1 spell for the foreseeable future, would I rather have it be Journey to Nowhere or Modern Age? And I decided that Modern Age was my answer. This also lets me spend my mana efficiently on this next turn cycle, because I can either cast Journey to Nowhere or Sacred Cat plus Dispel, and I think both of those are pretty reasonable here. I definitely am not blocking, that is for sure. Yep. Okay, so now I need answers, and I need them fast. So this is the Modern Age is going to transform. That's going to trade with the Delver. And I choose to cast Journey to Nowhere plus Dispel rather than... Okay, so there's an interesting choice here where I could choose to play the island to play around Spell Pierce, because if my opponent has Spell Pierce, they force me to Dispel the Spell Pierce if I choose to play the tap line this turn. However, there's a couple reasons that I want to play the tap line this turn. The first one is that if they have Spell Pierce, I'm pretty confident based on how this game is playing out that they're going to be able to trade Spell Pierce for a card basically 100% of the time. So I'd rather have them, if they do have it, just trade it for a card now, get it out of the way. And if they don't have it, then it's great. I can spend my mana efficiently. And the second reason is that I want to name red with this because I don't currently have a red gate in play. And if I draw into Red Blast, it's going to be a really big punish if I play the island. Okay, so I play the Journey of the Serpent. Beats for 1. So now I am dead to like Snap plus Dispel, Snap plus Counterspell, Snap plus Spell Pierce. Decent range of stuff, but I'm not going to not attack my opponent with a cat, so... Like, I'm not going to jump block with a cat. Murmuring Mystic. So I decided to cast Brainstorm in response because, like, I basically calculated that I was likely to spend all my mana on the following turn, and I didn't think I was ever going to have enough mana to, like, fully execute the Squadron Hawk combo, and like that's not what's important in this game. What's important in this game is being mana efficient. And so I Brainstorm in response to the Murmuring Mystic, so that if my opponent has a Dispel or a Spell Pierce, then they don't get to make a bird. So now I'm basically just committed to attacking with this cat every turn for the rest of the game, because it's like my only way of effectively racing my opponent. I'm just kind of stuck, like, and I'm just gonna counter anything they play here, and I'm gonna trade off here. So trade off, go to 1. Now again, I can attack for 5, gain 5 up to 6, and then I am dead on board. So this Destroy Evil does have to resolve. I do have 1 counterspell backup, but I'm going to Destroy Evil the Murmuring Mystic on my opponent's upkeep. Obviously, if I do it on my own main phase and my opponent's counterspell, they get to make a bird, and then they win. So I do this on my opponent's upkeep, they Dispel, I fight back. Now the bird is summoning 6, so I'm going to go to 1 again. I think this next turn cycle is really interesting. Okay, so strong. Okay, so I think I tanked here for quite a while. So my initial thought is, okay, I need to pump an attack with a cat, because if I don't do that, I'm going to lose. So, okay, what happens if I do that? I attack for 5, gain 5, go to 6, and then I die. Okay, that's not a great idea. What if I pump the cat, and then Journey to Nowhere the bird, and I'll go to 1? It's like, okay, well, That line also kind of sucks because I lose to any counterspell. And even then, it's like kind of not a great spot. So I think what I want to do is I want to clear the board away. I want to Journey to Nowhere this Tolarian Terror, and I want to basically I want to Journey to Nowhere this Tolarian Terror. But if I'm going to cast Journey to Nowhere on the Tolarian Terror, that costs 4 mana, so I'm not going to be able to pump the cat. So I think I work out here that I need to attack with the cat first. So I need to attack with the cat, because if I Journey to Nowhere the Tolarian Terror, and I don't attack, then they just kill me with a bird. So I have to attack with the cat. If they block, they block. If they don't block, they don't block. They block. Okay. Cast Journey to Nowhere. And now I actually have a counterspell up. So now I'm like, okay, the board is clear. I have a counterspell. So it's playable. It's actually playable. Now I just have to kind of put my opponent bricks. So I draw an island, which is fine because I have the Modern Age to discard it. And I choose not to play the Basilisk Gate because if my next 2 draws are both things that I want, then I would like to discard the Basilisk Gate to the Modern Age. Draw a Hawk. Draw a Destroyable. So I do in fact end up discarding the Basilisk Gate. And now this game is basically over. And I'm definitely going to fight over this Hawk, I think. Not only do I get to play around Spell Pierce and Counter, or just Spell Pierce specifically in this spot, but I'd like to spend my mana, and Quadrant Hawk is good. And now that I'm the beatdown, I'm just going to play a second Squadron Hawk, because let's say my opponent plays a creature, now it allows me to attack with the Squadron Hawk and also leave one back to block. So now, I choose to destroy Evil Tolarian Terror, which I think is better than pumping, for sure. There's no way to play around Spell Pierce there, so I just make the play that lets them Spell Pierce the worst card, which is in this case is the Modern Age. They DA themselves, which is certainly good, but it does put them dead to 1 Squadron Hawk attack. This is sort of a more interesting spot, is like, probably I'm supposed to cast Journey to Nowhere first in case they have double Pierce. Like, here I'm reading, okay, they probably have Snap. Or they have to have Snap to win. So I'm assuming that they have that, because in all other worlds I win the game. So what I want to do is set up a 2-turn clock here, and then also leave a creature back to block, and then also have Journey to Nowhere. And I can replay a Hawk after I play the Journey. So I think my play is coherent. Although there is some fear that my opponent goes like, counter the Journey, let the Squadron Hawk resolve, and then cast Echoing Truth on both the Hawks. And flip the Delver. So that would be a way I could lose from this position. I don't know if I was thinking about that in the game. It's possible. So yeah, in this spot, if my opponent flips Delver off of Echoing Truth, they win. But they don't. There is a cost of putting this card in your deck. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Alright, now they're dead. Super dead. Alright. Round 7. Okay, this hand's terrible. This hand is much better. Okay. Basic island snow covered variety. So I wasn't sure. I mean, this is why you should play snow covered islands, because like you just rule out so much stuff when you just play normal islands. Okay. So this I think is actually an extremely important spot. So I think I made the correct play here, and I think it's not exactly intuitive what the correct play is, because Island Cyclorian Island can be basically 3 decks. It can be Mono Blue Terror, it can be Blue Red Fae / Control, or it can be Blue Black Fae. Like, those are the 3 likely decks. If my opponent is on Blue Black, Terror, or Mono Blue, well, honestly, all of these decks can have Spell Pierce. But as I've sort of established in the previous matches, Spell Pierce is almost always going to trade for one of my cards. So I'd rather just get that out of the way early, and then I can determine whether or not they have Spell Pierce, and then play through that accordingly. There are obviously some cases where resolving your spell is really important. But also, if I... like, let's say my opponent has a counterspell, let's say my opponent's on mono blue, and their hand is Counterspell, Thought Scour, and I don't know, a creature. If I don't spend my mana and pass to play around their Counterspell, then they just go Thought Scour, untap creature, and then have a Counterspell backup. So that's just not a good play. Whereas if I play my card, they counter it, then they untap, and then they have to main phase the Thought Scours. And then they either have to decide, oh, I'm just going to fully tap out for this creature and go shields down, or they're not going to be able to deploy their stuff. So I think the obvious play here, and probably the play that I went for in my head immediately, was to just foretell Behold, because it allows them to, like, it blanks their mana. But the reality is, like, my opponent chose to hold up 2 islands. So if they're like a blue-black deck, I think most of the time they're going to fetch, or a blue-red deck, they're going to most of the time fetch their tap land and play that. Or if they're actually playing a multicolor fairy deck, like, some of their range here is going to be Spell Center Sprite. So against those decks, I think it's better to jam. And against mono blue, I think it's also better to jam because of the thing I described earlier, where if they do have a counterspell, it's not even necessarily bad for me because it forces them to not be able to develop their graveyard. However, like, if you're playing against mono blue and their hand is just counterspells and creatures, it is 100% correct to not cast anything. However, a decent amount of the mono blue player's range is going to be Thought Scours and counterspells, like a mix of stuff. And so I don't actually blank my opponent's mana by not spending my mana. Okay, that was a lot of words, but basically I'm pretty sure you're supposed to jam this and hope it resolves. And if it doesn't resolve, you're sad. And if it does resolve, you jump for joy. And it does resolve. So now I know for a fact that maybe not all, but many of my opponent's cards do not contain Spell Pierce. They would have had to drawn Spell Pierce. And now I also am pretty sure that my opponent doesn't have that many counter spells, because I think they would be tempted if they have like a mix of counterspells, lands, and creatures. I think it would be pretty tempting for them to like play their lands and pass a couple times and like try to get the counterspells out, and then like develop a bunch of creatures on the same turn. So you can sort of like start to develop what you think is in your opponent's hand from how they play. And I think, based on how they played here, they probably don't have that many counterspells. They probably don't have that many lands. So probably their hand is full of creatures or cantrips. Okay. A lot of words. A lot of words. I don't know if any of this makes any sense at all, but they play Terror, they pass. I draw a Squadron Knock, which is actually pretty reasonable because at some point I can try to go for Squadron Knock to bait a counter magic, and then I can cast a second one. Okay, so they don't spend all their mana, but they spend a decent amount. They cycle for an island and cast Thought Scour, which is interesting to me. Probably means they have another Lorien in their hand if they were willing to cycle the first one with 4 mana in play. So now I cast Behold the Multiverse. I expect this to get countered, but I need to cast this first to play around Spell Pierce. So I cast it first, play around Spell Pierce. If I was going to go Squadron Hawk, then... Okay, there's actually a decent amount going on that turn. Okay, so if I want to play around Spell Pierce, and I think that they have a Spell Pierce and a Counterspell, I have to cast Behold first, because if I cast Squadron Hawk and they don't counterspell it, then the only things I can do to spend the rest of my mana are Spell Pierceable. However, so basically I don't get to spend all my mana if they choose to let Squadron Hawk resolve, or if they have to let Squadron Hawk resolve, and they have a Spell Pierce, and I want to play around Spell Pierce. So I have to do this first, even though the like ideal sequence is like Squadron Hawk, they counter, and then just immediately play another one, but it doesn't always work out. So now, again, I'm playing around Spell Pierce, which is not entirely free, I guess, but it's free enough. It's not entirely free because the ideal sequencing for this turn would be Squadron Hawk into Modern Age, because I would then remove the Future Squadron Hawks from my deck. They have Force Spike, which is interesting. I don't think I saw Force Spike in the previous game, so that's something to note. They can play between like 1 and 3 of that card, I'd say. Okay, now they're breaking off. So I can't discard the Basilisk Gate. So I either have to discard the Modern Age and Guardian. I think with this few cards in hand, discarding the Modern Age makes sense. And now I don't get to I don't get to pump this turn, but I think that's fine. I just have to hope my opponent doesn't draw a bounce spell. They draw a lose focus, and they also in this spot they tanked a lot. They revealed lose focus, and then on their upkeep they waited for like I don't know 5 or 10 seconds, which let me know that their other card was either Lorien Revealed, which I don't think it would be Lorien Revealed because they would just draw that and cast it, or Thought Scour, or Consider, I think, or Mental Note. So like I've constructed though their hand is either lose focus plus mental note, lose focus plus consider, lose focus plus like their range is pretty tight here. Okay, so they misclick, lose focus. So only have to pay 2. I guess consider. They hit its Larian Tear. It's pretty good. It is pretty good. And I draw a gate, which this is just the nuts. Like it's just great. I love this deck. You just draw perfectly. Definitely a bit lucky, but I also had other good draws in my deck. Like if I draw into Strands, that's very good. If I draw into I don't know. Honestly, not that many good hits, but Basilisk Gate was one of my good draws. I can draw. I can also draw like Cantrip into Basilisk Gate, Cantrip into Strands, stuff like that. But Strands is, or Basilisk Gate is definitely one of the better draws here. And they scooped. Okay, so the 8th round of Swiss, I was 7-0. So I just scooped, went for a walk, and the last round of top 8 was kind of sad. I feel like I played well, but I was swiftly defeated. All right, so that first hand was just like 3 islands, and I'm not going to keep a 3-island hand with no white mana. Okay, this hand is good. This hand is good. Opponent goes Snowcarved Island, go. Like, all right, maybe they're on mono blue. It's a risky. Okay, so now they have a plains. Is this like familiars? What are we doing here? So I decided not to play the cat because I want to discard it to the modern nature value. So they cycle Ash Barrens. I'm like, okay, it's probably familiars or something. Okay, 3 mana. What is going on? I guess Preordain. I think I didn't want to get this countered. Like this card is worth 2 cards, so I didn't want to get it countered, I think. So I guess Preordain instead. Maybe at this point I already knew that they were tribe, and I thought they were holding up 3 mana counterspell. Okay, now they're only holding up 1 mana, so I'll just go Modern Age, escape the cat. And actually, I drew a tap or drew Squadron Hawks, so I'm just gonna resolve that while I can, and minimize the odds of drawing additional Squadron Hawks. So now they Shadow Rift. So now I know that, yeah, I know they're tribe off the Wedding Invitation and the Shadow Rift. So now they're just gonna cantrip a bunch. And like my goal now is to just find as much counter magic as possible, but I haven't found a single. I only have 5 counterspells in the deck, so it's not like that crazy to not find any. Okay, so I'm gonna cast this. I know it's gonna get counter most of the time, and then I have the choice of either pumping the cat and attacking or bluffing counter magic, but I don't know. Maybe bluffing counter magic is good, but I feel like it's not. Like, I feel like my opponent's just gonna go for it. Like my deck doesn't have that much counter magic, and it's even somewhat likely that my opponent has counter magic to back up their combo, based on how this played out. I thought the life gain might be useful, so the life gain would have been useful, except for my opponent gets to go Squadron Hawk, which puts them up a card. So then they attack, discard all 8 cards, and I'm dead. Oh, they only discard 7 cards. Okay. Game number dose. Okay, so I boarded out. So my goal in this matchup is just to not die, basically, and then I can just win with whatever's left. So I boarded out 2 Dumber Clerics, 2 Guardians, a cat, a counterspell, and I boarded in 3 Red Blasts. I boarded in 2 Blue Blasts. I boarded in the Flag Bearer. I think that's it. I think this matchup should be pretty reasonable for me, especially post board. I think I should be favored post board because their combo card, which is Inside Out, gets hit by both Hydroblast and Pyroblast, which I think makes like basically all decks that can run Hydroblast and Pyroblast should be favored against this this deck. At least that's my understanding. Although I haven't played against Tribe a whole lot, so I don't have a super strong opinion. So now I can either hold up counter magic or I can try to develop my own game plan, and I decided to try to develop my own game plan. Like, I'm gonna have time in this game to exchange my counter spells for key cards from out of my opponent. So I feel like holding up counter magic on this turn doesn't really achieve much. Okay, I guess I would have countered this, which is cool, but I don't know. Doesn't seem great. I guess Brainstorm. Cycle Ash Barrens. Wonder. Okay, we're looting. I discard Squadron Hawk because I want all my other cards. I only get to combo for one card off the Squadron Hawk. I actually just choose to put both Hawks back. Like, when you only have one Squadron Hawk, it's fine to put both back. And now I'm holding up, like, a mix of stuff. I can either cast Counterspell or Behold. I just decided to Counterspell the Impulse because I'm going to get choked on mana. Like, I'm not going to be able to hold up every single Counterspell I have in my hand every single turn. So I just need to, like, get these out of my hand and start firing them off, you know? Ideally, I would just hold up all my Counterspells for the combo turn, and then I can just overload their mana. But that's not realistic because I need to actually develop my own game plan and clock my opponent. Okay, what happened here? The top card of my deck is a Squadron Hawk, so this has to be cast this turn, I think. Yes, now I have double counter up, or I can Behold on their end step. Okay, so I counter the tribe. Again, this is the same thing. Like, I need to get cards out of my hand so I can fight over the combo with my mana efficiency. They have 2 dispels, but I still have the strands, so I'm not just doomed yet. So I cast Behold, find a Red Blast, which is great. That can hit the inside out, or can hit a counterspell on the strand. So now I have Standard Bearer in play, which this forces them to target it with inside out, which basically means they can't win in this unless they bounce this. And I looked at their deck list, and they don't really have that many bounce spells. And my guess is they would have boarded out the bounce spells because I don't think most Caw-Gates lists play this card, and yeah, I didn't expect them to have it. So I think this game is just over. But I still obviously want to be cautious and not take anything for granted. Hydroblast can be used to counter inside out, so that's another layer of protection. So I basically have 3 layers of protection. They have to bounce this and then have 2 counters plus their combo. So there's no reason to block. If they wanted their creature to be unblockable, they would have made it unblockable. Okay, I find another Basilisk Gate. Just gonna play the Modern Age, see if I can find a better card. Find a cat to discard. I don't really know how I'm losing this game, but basically I'm pretty sure I'm not losing this game, but I still want to be cautious. Or, like, make good plays, I guess. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of protection. So, yeah. Opponent is super dead. Alright. Game 3, most legendary game of the whole tournament. Okay. So I made one decision in this game. It was a very... Okay, so I decided to mulligan this hand. Oh, that had 1 land in it. And I decided to keep this hand. Very cool. Okay. My opponent casts Tireless Tribe. I play a tap land. My opponent kills me. Very cool. Very interactive. Very fun.